got a good one for you today on ArmCare FX. I'm going to talk about what's called a linear and transverse momentum compensation. So this is part of my research. I love when I get to talk about my research because I don't think anybody wants to read it, and that's okay. I'm going to make it short for you. Essentially, I looked at pitchers and I manipulated their stride length. So they had two different types of ground reaction force. A group that had a really high ground reaction force and a group that had a really low amount of ground reaction force. Same pitcher though. The cool thing is it's a true compensation because there wasn't a statistical difference between velocities. So at least from a velocity perspective, there was no effect size. It wasn't even statistically significant. You can think of them as being the exact same. Now, the cool thing was when you looked at the momentum relationship, so momentum, mass times velocity, you want to make a pitcher throw faster. Essentially, you would think you increase their mass and you increase their velocity. And what we found is that, the momentums, even though they were different, the velocities are the same, but there was great effects. And I call this a linear transverse momentum compensation. So when it came to the linear, the understride group, the group that had lower ground reaction force, simulating lower body fatigue, versus the group that had a high amount of lower body ground reaction force or great lower body power, we saw that there was a big effect size. I'm just looking at it into stride foot contact. The effect size is plus 80. It's 2.14. That is huge. Okay, remember, the effect size is like scouting. It's on a 20 to 80 scale or a 0.2 to 0.8 scale. But when we are beyond 0.8 or that 80 mark that we have, that's a big effect. So, that was a big effect of that intervention. Now, when I looked at the transverse momentum, the effects were also pretty moderate. So I had a 0.6. So it's a 60. There is a moderate effect. Something did happen there. Your stride length does affect your rotational momentum. Yeah, we see that. But this is the cool part. When you look at the throwing arm momentum in the transverse plane, that's the plane where we're doing horizontal adduction, the arm's coming forward and rotating forward towards home plate. When we took a look at that, the effect size for the throwing arm, was 1.36. So we're a plus 80 on that too. That's huge. So we're a plus 80 on the linear momentum. We're a plus 80 on the throwing arm momentum. And the key is that the transverse momentum for the understride, being that it was so much greater, bigger effect, versus the longer stride. So when the ground reaction force was less, the throwing arm momentum, was slower relative to the trunk momentum or the total body momentum. And that means there's a throwing arm lag. And what you might not know is throwing arm lag is a big contributor to elbow injuries, particularly Tommy John injuries. So here's the thing, we gotta protect our athletes, improve their lower body power. That's why I love that I'm a strength coach background, because I wanted to take not a mechanical perspective on how to make pitchers healthier and perform better, but on a physical realm. How can we train them? Because if their stride length reduces, if their lower body power and ground reaction force reduces, remember, they don't have that linear momentum anymore. It's reduced in the understride. So what do? How did this group improve velocity? Right? Should be simple. They increase, like we saw, this high effect size. They increased their rotational momentum. They rotated faster. The mass didn't change, same body, which is cool. It was a velocity effect on momentum, and we gotta prevent that. Train your athletes, high degree of lower body power, do a lot of plyometrics, evaluate their plyometrics. Don't just do two legs, do one leg, be above and beyond the simplicity of force plate evaluations. And you're gonna have your athletes geared up, prepared for competition, and perform at a very high level. Thanks for listening.